how many of you here have been part of a planning transformation before? Okay, about half the room has gone up. How many would say that that was the absolute best, favorite, most enjoyable experience of my entire professional career? I mean, I'm not as good as the Second City folks, give me a break. But, it really is true. Planning transformations are hard. But the real question is, why do they have to be as challenging as they are? One of the things to think about is if you want to do planning a different way, if you want those transformations to go differently, you have to think about getting it done and solving the problem a better way. I think as Sam said this morning, he said it best, there's a better way to plan. But in order to do that, it takes looking at things from a very innovative, very different point of view. And who else to share and talk about what that innovation means than a company that's been innovating for more than 150 years. And so, joining me here on stage, I'd like to have Coca-Cola come up and talk through what that process has looked like. So Yanni, Wes, Mike, if you guys could join me up here on stage. So really quickly, one last audience poll question, and just shout it out. What's the first thing you think of when you think of Coca-Cola? Come on, louder. A can. Polar bear, red can, right? You think of Coca-Cola soda, right? But there's a lot more to it than that. So, Yanni, tell me a little bit about, BODYARMOR and Coca-Cola and like all the brands that are within the portfolio.
Yeah, Evan, absolutely. So Coca-Cola is, a total beverage business. So you can see from the image, it extends into every category of something that you can drink, right? Try to capture ounces in stomachs. And that's 200 and some odd different brands that exist within Coca-Cola. And BODYARMOR alone is 100 and some plus different SKUs. And that ranges from a liquid in a bottle or powders that are getting, packaged onto sidelines or you're mixing in your drink. And we just happen to be one of those $30+ billion brands in the Coca-Cola portfolio.
That's awesome. Yeah. We were talking before this $31 billion brands within the portfolio. That's incredible. I mean, Wes, given where you sit within the Coca-Cola ecosystem, I mean, that's a big complex thing to manage. How do you and the Coca-Cola ecosystem actually manage that process today?
It's complicated. So there is the soda that we all think about when we think about Coca-Cola, and that comes primarily through our bottlers. But there are a lot of other products that are sold by the Coca-Cola company, by the North America operating unit that I'm a part of. That get to different routes of market, right? So what Yanni just mentioned with BODYARMOR, we've got a lot of ambient products like Smart Water and Topo Chico and Powerade that go through our bottlers, and our bottlers take that along with their soda products or bottled and products to our local customers. But and I'm losing it. Hey, travel make closer. I don't know. I'll just leave.
Yeah. One team.
Yeah, one team. Do we have a handout? Thank you, Sam. That's all right. Hello. Yeah, so we've got other routes to market, right? We've got chilled beverage. Really? It must be me. Chilled beverages that go directly to retailers. We've got what you see bag in a box, so our syrup product that goes to restaurants that you guys see when you have fountain dispense products in our restaurants. So a lot of different routes to market there. And then you think about the equipment. Speaking of those restaurants, our bottlers support bottle and can. Our North America operating unit supports almost all of our freestyle and our fountain equipment. So with a couple technical glitches there, it's a really complex ecosystem. It's a really complex supply chain. A lot of problems to solve all the time.
Okay, so let me kind of get this straight. We have probably hundreds of thousands of SKUs across the ecosystem. We have a massive complex supply chain of both the syrups and the concentrates, but also the full support. And also, Coca-Cola has been going through business model changes as well the last several years. Mike, can you tell me a little bit about, and tell the audience a little bit about the refranchising model and the way the business model for Coca-Cola has been evolving over the last few years?
Yeah, absolutely. So hopefully you guys can hear me okay. Yep, excellent. So to your point, Coca-Cola has evolved and kind of revolved, frankly, over its existence into making the product itself versus using a network of bottlers to do that. Over the last 20 years, the Coca-Cola company bought up a lot of small independent bottlers, think Ennis & Sons and Varnes & Sons distributors, consolidated them into one entity, CCR, and then sold it off to larger companies that could operate a bit of a more sophisticated manner. And in that way, the Coca-Cola company would be dealing with a handful of large bottlers as opposed to 150, 200 independent bottlers across the country. And so Reyes Holdings is one of those bottlers. We work with Yanni, we work with Wes. You guys have some sense of the complexity of the business. And our role is for about 20% of the country, if you look on a map, make the Coke, put it in cans, and get it on the shelf. That's simple and that complex, as you could imagine.
Okay, so, hundreds of brands, tens of thousands of SKUs, big complex system, went from sort of insourced in one monolithic supply chain to now sort of refranchised out, not just in the US. I heard you say, 65, 70 bottlers, not just in the Americas, not to mention the rest of the world, right? So massively complex supply chain that we're operating with here. That's not the type of scale that every company has to deal with. And yet, in all cases, you all started to step back and think about how to replan and reapproach how you think about planning. So, Yanni, maybe starting the journey with you and how you thought about Lyric. What were the planning and execution problems you were facing in the moment?
Yeah.
And what were you and BODYARMOR trying to solve for?
So, but BODYARMOR was unique it was acquired by Coca-Cola to come in and be the premier sports play in the market. But it was a brand that kind of took off and then started to stabilize and grew to $1.5 billion. And you got to treat those things very differently. And so I joined, and I tend to quip and joke that we were using abacuses and crayons to try and put together a supply chain, but that was kind of what it was. We were in Excel. Shout out to Krispy Kreme. I love the Excel work, but we were trying to manage everything manually, and we were trying to do it within this now complex system that we're joining and being a part of. So if I think about starting at demand all the way down to that last mile delivery, we had no visibility, right? So if I think of my problems in triplicate, I had no visibility to what I had, where it was going, and what was happening from a manufacturing perspective on a daily basis. I was lagged, and my planners were on phone calls and getting emails. And management of a supply chain of, millions and millions of cases is not doable.
Yeah.
So I had to look at visibility. The second piece was, how do I get a demand picture that is accurate to my ship from locations? How do I actually start generating customer demand so that I'm not getting calls from the bottlers like, hey, where's my product? And we ran into that pretty often because we were planning at such a high level, and it was just like, well, just make it and it'll go. And we're past that point. So demand was an issue. And then I had to find a tool that I could afford to put in, but could cover the full aspect of the supply chain. My responsibility is the full supply chain of BODYARMOR right now. And I needed something that was quick, affordable, but could actually leverage that. And then when, in that pursuit, being introduced to Lyric, I saw the power and the ability to get in there. And because of all the unique aspects, we were able to tailor it and build it very, very quickly.
In building all that, because I know the demand, the visibility pieces are really critical. Wes, I'd wonder from your point of view, if you think broadly across the NAOU operating system and where you sit today, problems like that probably have existed in pockets across Coca-Cola for a while. Why was that a topic that we needed to solve right now? Is it in a problem we were looking to address in the moment?
Yeah, I mean, it's a problem that I probably sat back and admired, and I think as Razat and Sarah were talking about in the fireside chat, these silos have existed for a long time, and they're silos that you got to pick and choose where you want to kind of fight your battles. And those silos within an AOU, this is a very scalable concept. We saw silos down to the point of our customer interactions, and so our first focus with our order promising work that we're working on right now, that focus has been on reducing those interactions, right? Combining those different sets of data, those disparate processes that are silos in and among themselves, combining those into single processes, getting the power of the consolidated data behind that process, and reducing the number of interactions that we have our customers, and ensuring we fill that truck. So for us, these were things that, if we think about maybe where we were 5 years ago, they were things that we had stood up very much in a siloed approach, solving a bespoke problem with a bespoke solution, often in Excel or Excel adjacent. And getting to this point, looking at a platform where we could really start pulling things together and compose a solution that was broader, that could solve many problems, and we could invest in solving future problems that we haven't even thought of yet.
That's great. No, Mike, I know you and the team at Reyes are at a different stage of your journey with Lyric. On the receiving end of, on the bottling and distribution side of this, if you were to step back and think about all the plan initiatives that you've had going on, what would happen, in a future world if you had just stayed the course, if you were just staying in sort of this offline, disparate, disconnected system? What's that outcome look like?
I think Razat said it well. At the end of the day, for the most part, the product would still end up on the shelf. Our current planning tool, like a lot of folks in this room, started, it's in Excel, like everybody else in this room, pulls from different, data silos, data, operating systems and so forth, whether it's demand, sourcing, et cetera. But it was born out of the pandemic. My favorite pandemic story, and the guys in the back on our team lived it. But some lady I never met reached out to me on LinkedIn and not even in our territory and asked me why she couldn't get Calf Diet 12 packs in her grocery store. Lady, I have no idea. But the point being that during the pandemic, we had very real issues where supply could not keep up with demand. And our current modeling was built on identifying those shortfalls based on demand, based on planned downtimes and so forth. And frankly, it did a hell of a job doing that. And it's helped us stay in stock. And we look at those and track those very closely. I think, circling this back to Razat and Sarah, had we not taken this step with Lyric, I think we'd be leaving some money on the table as far as fully optimizing that, right? Mm-hmm. So no doubt we're getting the product on the shelf when and where it needs to be there. I don't get outreach on LinkedIn from random ladies asking me about Calf Diet or Seagram's or anything else. But I feel confident with Lyric, particularly once we're implemented, we're going to do that in the absolute most cost-efficient way in terms of our crewing, in terms of our investment in out-of-network freight and so forth, and the different levers we can pull by virtue of having information, a few weeks ahead of when we're actually going to need to make a decision on that.
Yeah, so that's fantastic. I mean, you're able to actually make those decisions in advance based on what you're doing now at Lyric. If you were to step back, when I think of a traditional planning implementation or the way you typically approach a planning process, you're working through demand, supply, some matching process, and before you move into distribution. Is there a different approach, or have you and the team been looking at it differently, or is it more just because you're creating more visibility, similar to what Yanni was talking about? Are you guys, with more visibility, you have the data sooner, are you able to act faster and make those decisions more in line with what you're looking for the business?
I would say that is certainly the intent, and you touched on it. We're still rolling out our product, I would say, and not to use a football metaphor, but we're first in goal, right? So we're not yet sort of at the goal line, but we're right there. That is absolutely the intent. Where we're starting out is building the current capability that we have in Excel. We're essentially there. And then what we intend to do, going back to the discussion earlier around constraints and the ability to drill in, is then take Lyric and take our decision-making to the next level. So we're making a lot of forward-based decisions as we go through annual planning, evaluate strategic investments and so forth. I think Lyric's going to enable us to do that faster, more in a more repeatable fashion than we can do in Excel.
Got it. So maybe, Yanni, shifting over to you, you're a little bit more advanced in your journey with Lyric. How do you think about approaching the transformation, the change? Because there's a lot of stuff, a lot of great capabilities you talked about with visibility, better plan, seeing a full picture of demand, but at the ship to location, not necessarily at the DC. How did you start thinking about that process, and how did you approach it differently?
So if I think about the requirements that not just the team has, but BODYARMOR as a whole had, I had to take the perspective of how ultimately at the end, I need to make sure that the customer has what they want when they want it in its entirety, right? That's what everyone here tries to strive for and do. But I also have to be able to flex and partner across that Coca-Cola enterprise. And so it was where do I have, I'm going to use the buzzword, right? The synergy with the Coca-Cola network, and, Wes's work helped inform our work. The work that we're doing and that Saeed is doing from a network modeling allows us to interact, and so that we can take this Coca-Cola-wide strength and leverage it in a BODYARMOR that wants to move faster, right? But I want to do it for not just top line, but also bottom line. So, the classic approach of I need a demand, then I need a network, then I need a supply, granular production plan, then I'm going to do my customer service all the way down. Like, we still followed that, but we were looking at it through the lens of how fast can we get there? How much cost can we drive out? But then how do I bring about the power of the red truck, the red system, to make sure that we're driving the best end state for that customer? So it was a little bit different than I had seen in my past.
That's great. And now, Wes, you guys started almost in the middle of the process with order management as a starting point. What led you to starting there as a key area to begin your planning during your planning transformation?
Well, the snarky answer is that's the area I own, and I wanted to focus there myself. But I think we have it's probably two things. That is where everything rolls downhill, right? It rolls downhill to the point that we are trying to get product on the trucks and out to our customers. And it is the breaking point when we have a challenge with our customers. Everything upstream of that, there are things we can do to put us in a better position, right? There are learnings that we can take upstream, but focusing on the operational aspect of getting that order in, matching it up to inventory, getting it on a truck on time in full. There was plenty of complication right there to work with. And we felt like the most opportunity to immediately see some results and some improvement from a customer standpoint. So that's one thing. I think the other thing that when we think about the inner workings of an ever-changing network, right, an ever-changing landscape, I think about outlets that get product, through Mike's organization that might come from us or directly from Mike's organization, from Yanni's organization, and all of the changes that are constantly happening in the supply chain. There is a unique opportunity with a platform like Lyric to go in and tinker. And I like what Sam called out earlier in the DIY, right? When you do DIY work, people can tell it's DIY, and that's true. But it is also, there's something magical about going in and building different iterations and different ideas and quickly turning them into models that may or may not work, but not being hindered by an ERP system, not being hindered by maybe the old ways of thinking and putting processes together, but really just trying things out and seeing what sticks. And in my opinion, there's no better place to do that than right there where you're getting that product out to the customer, because it's so easy to do that kind of A/B testing. It's so easy to come back and say, this is what worked in one area, let's blow it out, let's see where else we can do it. Or this is something that failed and is not the right thing to do, let's quickly adapt. So huge focus, not just because it's the area that I wanted to push in, but it's the area that I felt like we could get the quickest connection and the quickest innovation that was material to the customer.
Well, but I also like what you said in terms of you were innovating and you didn't know if it would work. If it broke, you put it on the side. If it worked, you took it and you scaled it out to everybody else. Briefly touching across outcomes, and not necessarily the numbers and the outcomes, but if you were to think about maybe what's the most exciting set of capabilities that each of you have been able to drive into your business over the last, over your journey with Lyric so far.
If you don't mind, I'll go first.
Yeah, of course.
I was thinking about jumping on what you said earlier as well. I mean, I saw the list of companies here, right? And it's a mix. There's others in food and beverage, but I know Krispy Kreme spoke earlier. All these businesses are a little bit different, but they've all got a forecast. They've all got resources of production, whether that's bakery production lines, docks, trucks, et cetera, all with different capabilities. I think what's so exciting about Lyric is the modularity and the flexibility of it to take these different data sources, pull live from the source data, apply both best-in-class algorithms that are somewhat off the shelf, but then build your own specific to your business. A lot of that's going to be repeatable. I think as different as all of our businesses are, I think we end up solving variations on the same problem a lot. And I think Lyric's flexibility to build tools or workflows that can help solve not the same problem, but a similar problem repeatedly, and do it yourself without having to wait on a scope of work and a change order or what have you, is that's certainly what's most appealing to me.
Yanni?
No,
I'll jump right in.
Go for it.
Because for me, the excitement when I hear Mike talk about the solutions and others, I know Consolidated's been on Lyric for a few years, Will and team, the number of problems that are being solved within the Coca-Cola ecosystem. So outside of my world in North America and Saeed's world within North America on the end-to-end network optimization, when I think about what Yanni's team is doing, when I think about Mike and others in the bottling community and what they're doing, there are virtuous cycles here that are starting, right? We start to see those problems that we're solving together. Maybe some problems we wouldn't share with our number one competitor, but that we might share within our ecosystem to work together and kind of move faster. And Yanni and I were just talking about, as we bring together back-end data, there's a lot of things that we have to conform to kind of the Coca-Cola way that we do things. But Lyric gives us that flexibility to play and to learn from each other and to learn across the bottler community about how to move faster and solve some of these common problems. And up to the point of, I think, sharing those problems, sharing those solutions with each other, right? So super excited about that.
I think, to not be repetitive, to add two other things, right? We know the benefit of having a tool compared to not having a tool. And we understand that I can save a ton of money if I'm using an optimized solution. The other piece I think is the intangible benefit you get as a team executing and behaving in a tool, that collaboration that we talked about. And then on top of that, the confidence you build within senior leadership within an organization, right? Because normally, supply chain is this black box. Well, how did you get that demand number? How did you get to make that min-max safety stock at that warehouse? And being able to go to an app and flip it up and say, hey, boss, in my case, it's fed at BODYARMOR, and say, here's why you're out of stock. Here's what your supply plan looks like. Here's your projected revenue for the month. Gives him the confidence to go out and sell or not sell, or to put something on allocation. So for me, that was another huge benefit. And then the last one I'll say is the iterative ability of Lyric. So we're going through changes and we're trying to say, how do we do something better? I could sit here and say, I don't know if I would be able to have done it without Lyric, because we ran 30, 40 models in the span of 2.5 weeks to say what was the right decision. And every time we would present one thing, it's like, well, what if you did this? And normally that, 8 months ago, that would have been 2 weeks worth of work. Now it was 10.5 minutes of work. So for me, the iterative ability, the scenario play, and then the confidence it brings to the organization was massive.
That's fantastic. Well, Yanni, Mike, Wes, it sounds like you're on an exceptional journey so far. And Sarah, for the agenda next year, if you do a checkpoint, see how it's going then. So audience, thank you so much for your participation. As you just heard, breaking the planning blueprint, it's not a one-time event. It's not a single decision. It's a frame of mind, right? We talk about iteration. We talk about flexibility, about the confidence to fail fast and move fast to give the business the visibility they need. And we hope you all have an opportunity to enjoy, experience, and learn more through the rest of the day. Please, I think lunch is right up next. So enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you.